Hello RetroWolf family. In today's video we're going to take a quick look at how to not only maintain but repair your NES. Stay tuned, we're going to do a quick 72 pin connector in such a way that I hope you have confidence to do it yourself. So when I'm doing an NES, the only major things that you need, Phillips head screwdriver, and that will pretty much get you everything you need. I of course like to take some alcohol, a toothbrush, Q-tips, and a classic eraser from school, because while I'm in there, I like to go ahead and do a board scrub to maintain it for future longevity. To start off, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to flip over the NES and notice that there's 6 screws that we have to take out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once we have those out, we're going to pull the case apart and continue. Now that we've got the 6 screws on the outside of the Nintendo, we're going to go ahead and pull the case off. If you flip it over, you can simply lift the top off. Once inside the NES, you're going to notice that there is a shield here. We're going to take the shield off by removing all of the screws that hold it in. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 this time. So we're going to take those off and we'll be right back. Now that we have the 7 screws out of the RF shield, we can go ahead and pull it off. Not a lot to it, comes right off. And now we're inside the Nintendo itself, and this is where we're going to start getting into the 72 pin connector. If you look, we're going to have another 6 screws that we have to remove. There's one here, one here, one here, one here. That's 4 of them. Now something to remember when you're taking these out is there's 2 silver screws that are holding the case down. Those are going to be a little bit longer, and they're the only screws that you have to make sure you put back into their original position. Otherwise this will not work. Now that we've got the 6 screws holding the tray down, we're going to go ahead and pull it out. And the tray sometimes can fight you a little, but it should kind of just lift out of place. Not a big deal. Once the tray is out, if you wanted to, you could potentially pull the 72 pin connector off to replace the new one. I like to take it a little bit further, and on our power supply over here, we're going to remove a screw here. And then there's another one in the corner, and removing those is going to allow us to pull the board out. Now we have everything that we need to have out to go ahead and pull the board. And really you can push up on the audio here, it comes right out of place. Once we have it out, we want to flip it over. There's another RF shield. This one doesn't have any screws. With a little finagling, we can pull it out. You want to be careful though. Since we're not disconnecting the board from the controller ports, we don't want to hurt those wires. So just gently set it to the side. Now that we have our board out, we can start thinking about the 72 pin connector. We thought about it. Pulls right off, not an issue there. Once we have the 72 pin connector off, we want to go ahead, clean our contacts on both sides to make sure that the new one gets a good connection before we start. Now that we have the connector cleaned off for the 72 pin connector, I like to go ahead and make sure that there's no excess dust on the boards, because those do generate heat, and over time you could potentially see an issue with that. Now that we have the board scrubbed down and nice and clean, we're going to go ahead and reattach the back panel RF screen. And you may have noticed, I do use a microfiber cloth when I'm cleaning up anything that I've done. Let's talk a little bit about the pin connector itself. If you take a look at the pin connector, you'll notice all of these pins here, which make up the 72 connector. And on this particular one, there's quite a bit of a gap in between the pins and the plastic themselves. So we've picked up another 72 pin connector. You can usually get these for around $15. Not a big deal. And one thing that you'll notice when looking at this one is all of the pins are almost completely touching the plastic on this side. Now, if we wanted to, there's a couple of different options you can take. You can take your 72 pin connector and boil it. Get your water going to a rolling boil and put it in there for about 5 minutes. Usually that's enough to relax the metal to where the pins will go back into their original position. This is not a perfect fix. This is a temporary fix. They will get bent again. Another option is to take a fine pair of tweezers, a needle, a bobby pin, anything like that, and actually bend each pin by hand to make sure that they're nice and tight when you put your cartridge in. That takes a lot of work though, and for 15 bucks, might as well get another one. We're going to go ahead and install the 72 pin connector on the board and begin the reassembly. One thing to keep in mind when installing the 72 pin connector, the top portion of it has a lip that comes over the bottom. The lip needs to be on top when you're placing it on the board. Once the 72 pin connector has been placed back onto the board, you can go ahead and start putting in your screws. I always start with the 2 screws that we pulled out of the power supply. Now that we've got the 72 pin connector on the board, the 2 screws for our power supply, which also encases the outputs, we're going to go ahead and put our tray back in. This might take a little bit of work to try to fit it in. Sometimes I can slide them right in.
That's what she said.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of effort. They want to fight me. But we're going to go ahead and put it in. Now that we have the tray back in place, remember the 2 screws that were silver. These are the 2 screws that have to go into the secondary position on the board itself. One thing that I forgot to mention, when you're putting the tray on the bottom of the tray there's a small tab. That tab does need to go underneath the board and over the RF shield that was on the back of the tray. So make sure you have that in place before you put the screws in. So you'll notice on the bottom of the board, the tray actually does have to slide, clip into place, and then you're ready to install all of your screws. Now that we have the 6 screws back in place on the tray itself, this is a perfect time to test your unit. Before you get the casing put back on, not a bad idea to go ahead, put a game in, and see what happens. Keep in mind, we do not want to make contact with the board itself because it will be charged. Okay, so now that we've tested our unit, we're ready to put the RF shield back on. Quick update though, Once I put the game back in and tried to turn it on, I was getting a lot of noise feedback on the system through the RF. If we put the AV adapters on, you didn't hear that. So I went ahead and resoldered the points here. These also work as a ground. And once I did that and put it back together, we had no more feedback. So I think we're good to go there. And another thing, once we turned the unit on, we did get the flashing light that you would typically get when your 72-pin connector goes out. I believe this case was just because the new one was covered in creosote, so when they shipped it, it didn't get any corrosion on it. So you have to clean that off quite thoroughly sometimes to get them to work properly. But now that we've got that done, once the unit's powered on, it comes up, plays just fine. So we're going to get the RF shield back on and get the case put back together. Remember, the RF shield had the 7 screws all around, and the only holes in it have to have a screw. Now that we've got the 7 bolts into the RF shield and the other 6 around the corners and in the centers, we have completed our 72-pin connector replacement. If you have any questions, make sure to scroll back through the video. We covered everything that you could come up with a simple connection replacement. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the video. If you have any ideas for future videos as far as the repairs go, things that you may be afraid to take on yourself, let us know. We'll see if we can't help you get through it. Make sure you check out all the playlists on the RetroWolf channel. There's some really good stuff. Peace.